Hello friends, and welcome back to the Hall of Craft. So I want to keep this intro relatively short and sweet, but there is a couple things that I would like to address real quick. So the first of which being, I just wanted to give a big shout out and thank you to everyone who showed up in the comments on my last video for the sun tree. I asked you guys to comment what inspired you, and you guys showed up in a huge way. I was just blown away. I wasn't sure what to expect when I said that, but I certainly wasn't expecting the response rate from you guys that I got, and just the genuine wholesomeness of all the comments that you left just had me smiling ear to ear for the whole week. So thank you to everyone who showed up, and if you missed it, go check out my last video. You should still have a couple days when I upload this video if you want to win this sun tree here. All you have to do is like that video, comment on it, and subscribe to my channel, and you'll be entered to win. I'll pick someone and I'll reach out to you for your shipping information, then I'll mail it to you. So thank you to everyone who showed up, and if you missed it, go check it out. And so secondly, if you've ever checked my homepage for this channel and looked at the banner, you'll see that it says I make crafting videos and painting videos and campaign guides. That's a bit of a lie because I haven't made a single campaign guide yet, but clearly I wanted to, so I'm gonna try and address that with this video. And the main reason being, I really have been inspired by Matthew Colville's videos. Check him out if you haven't already, but he's like so super popular. I can't believe that you wouldn't have found him already. But his style of videos is just so educational and informative, and I really wanted to try and take that style and marry it with like the crafting that I do to try and give you, the viewer, like a complete package that you could just take that, replicate it, put it on your table, and then you're good to go. So that was kind of the goal. Shortly after I started my channel, I tried to film a video like that, recorded like 2 hours of just me talking at the camera, and quickly into the editing process realized that if I had to finish that video, I was going to poke my eyes out, because I can't just watch that much raw footage of my own face. It made me cringe off the face of the earth. So I deleted all that and said, no, not happening, can't do it like that, need to figure something else out. And hopefully this video is me figuring something else out. So I have a package for a location in my campaign called SHIVERBANE, which my players have just finished, so as of last session, so I can basically let you look behind the curtain at all the juicy DM details. So I have a pretty fast and loose DM style, open to a lot of room for improvisation, because I feel like that's really important to be able to adapt to your players. So don't expect me laying out every single detail here, but I'm gonna give you what I feel is the core things you need as a DM to just take this and give it to your players. And my players liked it, so this test group worked, I guess. But yeah, if you're interested in all that information, I'm going to be sharing that with you first. If you're not, and you just want crafting videos from me, I do have a bit of craft involved here. I'll put that closer to the end, and I'll give you a timestamp in the description if you just want to skip ahead to that. The main enemies of SHIVERBANE are called half-men, and they use these giant phalanx-like shields in combat, and so I crafted a bunch of these shields. Just a quick dirty craft, took me a day or less. I think I did it the day before my session because I was procrastinating a little bit, but they turned out pretty good, and if you want to replicate them, I'll show you exactly how. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully you enjoy this kind of content, and let's just jump right into it. So to start this off, I need to tell you about where SHIVERBANE's located before I tell you what SHIVERBANE is. SHIVERBANE is located deep in the Northlands, in the heart of the northern tundra. It is a settlement kind of in the mountains, kind of tucked into a little valley, and it's occupied by a terrible group of cannibalistic, minotaur-like creatures called the Half-Men. The Half-Men have been at war with the Northmen for as long as anyone can remember, and they are much stronger and much larger than any regular humans, so it is a war they're generally winning. However, for some reason, The half-men have been holed up in their keep and have not come out at all. At the entrance to the half-men's keep, there lies a mysterious barrier, which is of particular note because the half-men are known for working with machines and iron and making metal stronger than anyone else has ever seen before, but they are not known for using magical abilities at all. So the presence of the barrier is enough to scratch heads as it is. In order to dispel the barrier, I had my players run around the Northlands collecting 4 magical artifacts. If you'd like to run this in your game, you can basically replace these with whatever you like, and what they are is not necessarily important, just that they need to get them. It's a quest to get them into SHIVERBANE to help them gain some experience. Like I alluded to before, the half-men are minotaur-like creatures who feast on flesh. I have chosen to represent them with Reaper Miniatures Minotaur because they're cheap and I can get a whole bunch of them, considering I wanted the half-men to have quite a large presence, almost army-like. They're broken down into 4 basic categories. The half-men have grunts, brutes, greyskins, and Malgak himself. So, to start at the beginning, we have the grunts. These are the basic half-men, kind of the vanilla, one-size-fits-all. They do the heavy lifting, they're kind of the pawns of the army. But that does not mean that they are not to be feared. The half-men are fast, they are strategic, and they are strong. They will use their charge to their advantage, and they will use reckless almost all the time. With a love for battle and a reckless abandonment for their own self-preservation, they will be ruthless in combat. The second variant of the half-men is the brute. If this were a regular army, these would be considered the tanks, the ultimate frontline. They have a massive health pool and a massive strength score. They will be in the front, charging, recklessly knocking people over, and multi-attacking. One particularly devastating ability of the brutes is that their natural 20 crits will sever limbs. Their weapons are made of solid adamantine, and their butcher knife will cleave limb from limb and literally cut your party apart. The third type of half-men is by far the most mysterious and cunning. In my world, no Northman has ever been known to kill one. They're known as the Greyskin Hunters, and they will stalk their prey and taunt them. They function more like assassin rangers than they do like brutish melee warriors, but they do have a strong strength. They will use arrows and traps and lure their prey into ambushes. They have more tools at their disposal than the other half-men, who resort mostly to melee combat. The Greyskin Hunters will pepper their foes with arrows from a distance, retreating back to safer areas, kiting them with their high movement speed. And when they know they have a target trapped, they will use a confusion poison arrow, which basically casts the confusion spell if the target fails their save. Basically, getting hit by this alone spells your doom, as they will close in and capture you. Taking advantage of their favored terrain and favored enemy along with sneak attack, the Greyskins are rightfully feared, and are often found in commanding positions among the half-men's ranks, bolstering the effectiveness of the brutes and grunts by giving them precise and cunning orders to execute attacks. The final variant of half-men is Malgak. He is the leader of the half-men by force due to his size. He is 3 times the size of any other half-man brute, and at one point he was one of them. Now he is mutated into something different through the power of demonic energy imbued by Jasad Duthane, who is the main villain of my campaign. Stat-wise, Malgak functions as a Garistro with legendary actions, if you were to oversimplify it. He charges, knocks people down, he has intense saving throws, magic resist which bolsters his intense saving throws, a pretty devastating multi-attack, he can knock people down, and he maintains the brute ability to sever limbs, which makes him particularly devastating, along with his legendary actions that let him make extra attacks or continue to knock people down. Mulgak is kind of intended as a one character fights the whole party type of boss. It lets the players kind of go Nova and burn all their abilities at once and feel really epic when they defeat him because he's dishing out massive damage. So as I referred to before, my style of DMing is pretty loose and fast. So I mostly use notes kind of like this when I'm moving through, other than when I decide to draw a big map of the area for my players. So on the left page here, I kind of talk about the tunnels the players immediately face as they're coming out of the barrier and into SHIVERBANE. So these are kind of a long, winding set of tunnels that the halfmen will use, specifically the Greyskins will use and kind of retreat through it, kiting the players and trying to deny them rest and trying to tire them out and kind of drain their resources. And eventually they will try to lead them to the center room where they will stand on ledges and kind of release a Remoraz on the players that is hiding underneath the ice. By disturbing the ice with an arrow, for example, they will try and release a Remoraz on them. And one specific thing about these tunnels that I found worked really well was I made the gaps from room to room or section to section very extremely long. One thing I find that my party does, I'm not sure if this is applicable to all parties, but they will try and rest as much as they possibly can, and they will try and backtrack a lot to try and make sure they've explored everything, which tends to lead to very monotonous sessions when they're going through a maze-like area. So, by making the sections very long, for example, it takes them 2 hours of walking through the ice before they find another notable section, they're less likely to try and backtrack and do that completionist mindset when not appropriate. And then the second page here kind of focuses on how the halfmen think and what they have to use at their disposal. I find that I perform better as a DM when I know what my enemies want and how they are going to try and get it, rather than a specific set of examples trying to predict what my party's going to do. I can react better to them when I know what my villains want. So that's what this page is basically trying to put together for me. So the halfmen have a list of their strategies, and they have a list of their pros and a list of their cons. And then they have 2 pieces of equipment other than their set of abilities that they will use. The first of which being a jagged grappling hook, which they will throw at their opponents from a distance, attempting to try and restrain them and pull them in for later. They will take them back to SHIVERBANE, interrogate them, torture them, and then eventually eat them. And the second piece of equipment they have leads into the craft later. So this is a massive adamantine shield. The halfmen will use this in a phalanx formation and basically try and push their opponents into a corner, surrounding them, pushing them down, and protecting themselves from their vulnerabilities, which happen to be ranged attacks and spells most often. So they can kind of use this to close the distance and kind of cover their vulnerabilities. So here's a rough map of SHIVERBANE interior that I put together on Incarnate real quickly. So, like I said before, I like to keep this pretty generic so that I can fill it in as I'm building the board in front of my players. I have my shelf with all my terrain behind the table, and I can basically just walk over to that, looking at this map behind my screen, and having a general idea of the layout that I want to put. So if you look at the main valley, I have a river that flows through the middle, I have a ridge immediately on the right side as the players come out of the ice tunnels, and then there's various trees and a bridge that crosses the river, leading up to a main gate which itself is on a ridge. And then over to the right we have a side gate with some huts and a fire kind of indicating that there will be a small presence over there. The reason why I have a red line down the middle of the valley area is to indicate to me how large it is. So that is the halfway point, and it happens to be about 100 feet if those are 5 feet squares on the map, which is significant to me because my boards happen to be about 100 feet of 5 foot squares for my table. So I know that I can build the valley with 4 boards. And that theme carries through to most of the sections of the interior of SHIVERBANE. So I know that the supply room, the forge, the Great Hall, Malgak's fighting pit are all going to be sizes of boards that I have at my disposal. So you can adjust this to fit whatever terrain you have, but that's why I built it for myself in this way. So you may have noticed on the last page that I had written out some stats for the half-men's shields. And you may be wondering why I didn't write it out in the nice format that I did for the stats for the half-men themselves. And that's because I didn't actually ever get to test those stats, because as my players exited the tunnels and noticed the main valley area where there was a giant force of half-men waiting for them that they had alerted, that they would dimension door all the way to the main gate, quickly run through it and shut it behind them, trapping all half-men wielding shields out in the valley, and therefore never even encountering them. So I cannot tell you that those stats are tried and tested and balanced, but if you want to go ahead and test them in your game, feel free to let me know how that goes. So, without getting into too much detail, each of these rooms kind of has a pretty self-explanatory title to it. So the jail cells have prisoners that are being interrogated and tortured and cut up and eaten. The ambush area is, as explained, an ambush area through the side gate. The forge is where the half-men build all of their magnificent weapons and all of their adamantine creations. The supply room is full of supplies for said forge, the Great Hall is where they eat, and then Malgak's fighting pit is kind of where Malgak hangs out and fights any challengers who would dare oppose his rule. And then his inner sanctum happens to be beside the whole reason why my party needs to enter this area. The main mission of my campaign is that my players need to travel the globe searching for the 4 ancient gateways, open them, and bring the metallic dragons back to their world, restoring order and rescuing from darkness, basically. So, here's how to build the shields. Like I said before, it's a relatively simple build, pretty beginner, and really quick, so you can do this in like a day. I'm going to start with some foam core, and I'm just going to cut out the basic panels for the shields. So these are about 1.25 inches by 2.5, maybe 3 inches tall, and I need 2 panels per shield, so I'm just going to cut a bunch of these out and get them ready to go. So in order to have these kind of come together at an angle, I'm going to have to bevel the edges for all of them. For this I'm going to sharpen my knife and just kind of hold it straight up and just drag my knife down along the edge to give it a 45-degree angle. And I'm going to do that for all of them. So once that's done, I'm going to glue them together. Just going to use some hot glue. Okay, so once I've done that to all my shields and they're all ready to go, I have these little foam bits that I got from a giant bin from the dollar store, and I want to add some spikes on these shields to make them look a little more like deadly to be rammed by. So I'm just going to trace the shield shape onto these orange triangles and then cut it out, and I will eventually glue it in the middle of the shield. And then I have those diamond shaped ones, and I've cut those in half, and I'm going to stick those on the sides. So I'm just going to measure out on my shields and mark where the middle is so that I don't have these kind of like in a weird spot. And then I'll just use more hot glue to glue them on. And like I said before, I'm just going to stick those diamond ones onto the sides, kind of using the green piece as a guide to figure out where they go. So I have these plastic cocktail skewers that I got from the dollar store, and they have 2 really great pieces to them. They have these kind of prongs at the front that make great spikes, and they have these little diamond shapes at the top that usually make great details for just disrupting a plain surface so it doesn't look so plain. In hindsight, putting these at the top where I put them, I kind of thought that it might disrupt the space and make it look better, but my girlfriend pointed out to me that I made these look like pokey penguins. And once I saw that, I questioned my whole build for a minute. But it turned out pretty good after the paint, so I'm not too worried about it. So like I said before, those extra parts make great spikes, so I'm just going to kind of stab those into the front of the foam and kind of establish where they go, and then I'll pull them out, put some hot glue in the hole that I made with it, and then put it back in so that it gets a nice secure connection. And I'll just do that to all of them. So once I've done that, I'm going to use another piece of the cocktail skewers to make the handle at the back. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball where it would be a good spot for the half men to grab it, and then I'm going to glue it in place. So I have these wooden circle bases that I got, and I'm just going to use these as a base for these. Another hindsight tip would be to weigh these down. Like I said, I built these in a day and it was kind of last minute, so I didn't really have time to run out and get things I didn't need, and I'm all out of washers at the moment. But putting a washer on the bottom of these would do wonders for helping them stay standing on the table. They are a little front heavy at the moment. I was hoping that the base would kind of fix that on its own, but I think it kind of needs the weight. So I'm also going to put a bunch of hot glue on the bottom of these and then just press them down onto my cutting mat to give them kind of like a rubbery base so they don't slide all over the place. And then I'm just going to use my knife to kind of pry them off. So I have kind of established that some of the half men are generals. They function more or less the same as the other half men, they're just a little better at giving orders. And I wanted one of these shields to belong to one of the half men generals, so I wanted a way to kind of show that, and I figured using some of my Citadel skulls would be a pretty good way, so I just glued that onto the top. And then, like all my other crafting projects, I used the Black Magic base coat from Jeremy at Black Magic Craft. It's just black paint and Mod Podge and mixed together in a jar, and I just base coat the whole thing with that. The Mod Podge does wonders for holding light crafts together and really making things more secure. So once that dries, I'm just going to base coat these in green. So like I said, I want these to be like adamantine, so that's a very green metal, and I've never painted a metal like that before, so this was an interesting challenge for me. I figured that base coating the whole thing green would be a great way to start, and then I could dry brush them after it dries. So I'm just going to mix some silver and some black together, very, very sparingly on the black because it'll take over the paint really quickly. And then I'm just going to dry brush these with that to try and give them kind of like a metallic look, but not totally covering over the green. I have to say, while I was working on this, I was very disappointed right after this step, but I was able to save it in the later steps, and I'm happy with the end result. But at this point in the craft, I was kind of wondering if this was going to turn out at all, because it looked kind of cartoony to me at this point in time. So once I'm done dry brushing that, I'm going to just use regular silver, no black, and do another dry brush, kind of focusing on the highlights. And then I'm going to wash them. So I just have my homemade wash here. It's Flow Improver and Matte Medium and inks, acrylic inks, and I'm just going to coat the whole thing because I thought that that might be a good way to kind of save the comic bookiness of this and add a little more detail and pull out this natural detail. And I figured that these would be a little more gritty, and that would just do a good job of achieving that. So then I wanted to kind of add some highlights back to these, so I made a mixture of silver and blue and green and vanilla, of all things, and I started dry brushing the highlights of that to try and give it a better look. Add some more contrast to these. So at this point, I took some taupe and I started painting the bone color of the skull on the top of the general's shield. And then once that dries, I come in with some suede and coat the whole thing. The dark taupe at least does a good job of covering up the black and then letting the suede and the other bone colors kind of come through. And after that dried, I felt like these needed even more contrast, so I wanted to add more dark tones, and I rewashed these with the same wash I did before. This is just a black wash I made at home. So once that's dry, I'm going to come in with some more suede and just dry brush the skull to add some highlights to it. And then I'm going to dry brush it with vanilla to add even more highlights to it. And after that, I'm going to mix up kind of a frosty color, because these are in SHIVERBANE, so I figured they should look pretty cold. So I mixed a kind of cyan vanilla white combination to get this nice Arctic looking frost color, and I dry brushed just the highlights of these shields, and I felt like it did a really good job of kind of giving them more depth, especially right after the second wash. And then once I'm done with that, I'm just going to use a straight vanilla and dry brush very, very sparingly on these to kind of add a further highlight. And then for the final step to add some detail, I mixed some Christmas red and some black together, and I have kind of two sections on my palette there just trying to get the right color. And then I took an old toothbrush and I'm just going to splat these things to try and get like a bloody look. I find that if you paint blood on, it never looks right. But if you use this method, you get kind of a really good blood splatter look to it, at the cost of an old toothbrush that you probably would have thrown out anyway. Once you're done with this step, like all my other builds, the final step is to coat them with varnish. So a coat of gloss varnish and a coat of matte varnish. I didn't film it for this because it's not a very interesting thing to watch. It just looks like you're spraying them with water. But it does wonders for protecting your pieces on the table. And none of the paint will rub off when your greasy fingers touch your own builds. So don't skip the varnish. And there you have it, your very own adamantine half-man shields, ready to batter some Northmen into a pulp and corner them and take them back to feast on. And that's it, friends. That's all there is to SHIVERBANE. I hope you enjoyed this peek behind the DM's curtain. Let me know if you did down in the comments below, because I've got a backlog of content that my players have already gone through, and I would be more than happy with then to clean it up and put it up on the internet for your enjoyment. So let me know down there in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you had a good time, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already. I upload crafting videos and painting videos as often as I can humanly make them. So stay tuned for more of those. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.